Just a quick little, I guess, note I wanted to say to everyone. If you guys don't know, the summer's been really hard on me and my family. I was a government contractor and I got laid off and trying as hard as I can to get another job, but the job market just sucks right now. And coupled with one of our puppies getting injured in a car accident, it's been tough financially, emotionally, and spiritually. And I really have to say thank you to the Fishing the DMV community and all my Patreon supporters and a couple of saints out there that if it wasn't for you guys, we probably would have lost our house. It's been really tough. And if it wasn't, again, for you Patreon supporters that help pay the mortgage right now, and a couple of saints out there that have kind of helped us patch it together, we truly couldn't have made it. So again, I just want to say thank you guys so much. I don't give you enough credit for everything that you do. So thanks again. And if you would like to go support me on Patreon, it's the only way that we can keep making this stuff work right now in this tough economy. Thanks again, guys. Hope you enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and today I headed back up to Annapolis to interview a guy with a really cool story. I have on Branson, the head of the Invasive Fishes Program, and I had to practice that about 10 times to make sure I got that whole title right because words and me don't work really well. Dude, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
We were talking like off camera. You grew up in a really, really cool place. Like if I had my druthers growing up in Vienna and Western Loudoun, I would have much rather grown up where you did.
Yeah, so I grew up in Princess Anne, Maryland, small town on the lower eastern shore, Somerset County. And I think, my upbringing wasn't that different from a lot of guys that grew up down there. I grew up hunting and fishing, that sort of thing. And you just end up being a kid that likes being outdoors. Yeah.
What, for people that don't know, that are like in Southern Virginia, Tennessee area, what is the Eastern Shore? Because is that like a slang for people in the area that if you know, or is that actually the name of the area?
Yeah, it's the name of the area, and we kind of take it pretty seriously. There's a lot of pride there.
Really?
Yeah, so the Eastern Shore of Maryland is smack dab between the Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic Ocean. So, there's a lot of like brackish water fishing opportunities, freshwater fishing opportunities. But yeah, we take it pretty seriously. It's a rural area. Where I grew up, there's more chickens than people. There's a lot of chicken houses, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not the big city. Salisbury is kind of the biggest city around. Princess Anne, I'm not sure how many people it has, but a few thousand. But yeah, it's like small town living. Now I'm living in Columbia, and it's a big difference between, the number of people, like everything. It's way big, and I grew up in a pretty doggone small town.
Does Chincoteague and Astig play into the Eastern Shore, or is that considered separate from the Eastern Shore block? Like, how does all that work out?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. That's Oceanside. But yeah, like Chincoteague and Astig, certainly part of it. I did quite a bit of skimboarding on Assateague as like a teenager and stuff like that. But yeah, like, surf fishing, that's where you got to do that sort of stuff. So
what is the culture like over there? Because I remember, like, again, being someone that was kind of like insulated in Northern Virginia, like just the pony penning being like the big cultural thing over there. Is that overblown and hyped, like the whole like pony penning thing and all that? Or is it, for you, is it like eye roll? It's a tourist season. It's like that. You know what I mean?
So, some people like really get into it, that sort of thing. Like I think I've gone once and that was enough for me. It's a big event. People get kind of amped up about it. But me and like, my buddies growing up, we never participated in any of that too much.
It's weird because I've always thought about, like, for a Mardi Gras, it's like, well, it's cool because it's a tourist thing, but if you live there, I feel like there's almost an eye roll to like, we need this, but this is the time of year we just don't like because of all the tourists that come in. So I've always wondered that from, I guess, your perspective, being a local. It's like, yeah, I could see that both ways.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm assuming, it is a big event. It probably brings in a lot of money to those communities. Tourism is a big part of like Chincoteague and Assateague, right? Ocean City. But yeah, just personally, I've never really paid too much attention to it. But you go to Assateague and you kind of have to deal with the horses, right? So and like people love it, but that's never quite been my thing.
Were you big into surf fishing growing up? I've dabbled in it, but I never got like hardcore into it.
Like I never got really hardcore into it. It's always something we did like a few times a year. Some of my buddies got into it more than I did, but my fishing was largely, we have a lot of brackish rivers. So like I grew up, there was kind of bait fishing. So, catching like, when I grew up, there's a pile of Atlantic croaker, and we caught a lot of Atlantic croaker, spot, things like that. Also kind of when I really grew up, so like the 90s, striped bass were coming back after the moratorium and numbers being down. So, I caught a lot of striped bass as a kid, that sort of thing. But yeah, like one of my memories is, after soccer practice, me and my buddies would go to like a tidal creek, so like a bridge, and we would catch schoolie stripers on rattle traps and stuff like that. And like, that's cool. After soccer practice, me and Dustin would go do that. It's just kind of what we did. And, that kind of fishing and stuff was kind of what I grew up doing.
It's so interesting because when we talk about, just in general, I've had people on the show talking about the outdoor culture and stuff. I really do think it's a culture that is generationally taught. And when you go to places where you grew up, or rural Virginia, Texas, it's in your blood. And it's interesting for me growing up in Vienna and Western Loudoun to see the mass, so many people that aren't from here moving in here that don't have that same, like the outdoor culture, the outdoor vibe. And it's harder to re-educate than it is to teach. And it's just, I didn't understand that because when I grew up there, it was all farmland. So everyone was hunting and fishing. Right. But now you look at the kids and everybody's like, well, I'm from California, I'm from here. It's like, well, what is, like, oh, I saw a deer. It's like, I know, they're like pigeons. They're everywhere. It's like, it's crazy. And I didn't understand it till I got older to be like, oh, it's kind of hard. Like, it's a cool, when you have that moment to grow up in a place like that, cherish it, because it's so hard to find it nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. Like, where I grew up, it's kind of what a lot of people did. So my mom's from the Eastern Shore. My dad's from like rural North Carolina. He grew up hunting and fishing too, But yeah, like if you don't kind of grow up around that, if you don't have those experiences, it's tough to get into it. Like I said, I live in Columbia now. Like I don't know a lot of people there that fish a lot, that hunt a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is totally different from where I grew up. Right?
It is. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, it's hard to believe. And, it's, these outdoor hobbies, they are harder to get into, especially as an adult, right? You just grow up with, kind of this baseline knowledge that you're just picking up. And if you don't have that growing up, I think it's hard to like get into fishing. It's harder to get into hunting. And you do have these like barriers to entry. Like some of the stuff's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can fish for cheap, but like you can also spend a lot of money on fishing stuff, right? And really you need to get like success early on to like stick with it. So like, I get emails from people all the time, like, how do I catch a fish and stuff like that? And like, and a lot of the questions are super basic, but if you don't grow up with that kind of knowledge, like where are you going to know to start? Right?
That's fascinating to me because it's, like 100%. Like when you grow up in it, when someone asks something as basic as like, how do I catch a fish? To me, that's just like over the top because I grew up in this. Like, why would you do this, this. But then when you step back, like there are people that they have not experienced any of this, and you have to take a few steps back. And then on the flip side, I went to ICAST this year, and they have drones that'll drop shark bait 300 yards offshore. And it's just a weird dichotomy now we have, where we have the one end of the spectrum being the $200,000 bass boats and the drones, and then the other where people don't even know, like, where do I go to catch just a croaker? And it makes people's jobs now really hard. Like, because how do you make yourself available to every demographic there is? And with the Eastern Shore now, like, for people that wanted to, vacation here, what kind of like destinations are there to go fishing if you had to name like a couple?
Good question. There's a lot of like water access. And it kind of depends on what you're going for. For like a shore-bound angler or something like that, depending on what you're trying to catch, there's really a lot to offer, right? So like Somerset County, like Crisfield gives you access to like lower Chesapeake Bay, those like seasonal marine species, like we were talking earlier, like specks, red drum, stuff like that. Also croaker, although croaker fishers aren't quite what they used to be. Yeah. But there's things like that, places like that. If we were talking about Assateague, people surf fish off of Assateague, Ocean City, Chincoteague. Like there's a lot of big and fun fish available to you, right? But even if you're just looking for like more freshwater species, Wicomico River, the Nanticoke, those are areas where you can go and you can catch kind of the gamut of what the Eastern Shore has to offer. Closer to the mouth, you're into those brackish water species, seasonal saltwater species. If you go further up, like, well, you're looking at blue cats, you're looking at snakehead, largemouth bass, that sort of stuff. So like there are a lot of different places you can go. Eastern Shore has a lot of water, and a lot of those tidal rivers have a lot to offer.
Yeah, you mentioned it a little bit. Like, how are like the croaker, the flounder, those other species doing right now compared to years past?
So that's not quite my wheelhouse.
I mean, anecdotally, like, because I know, like, when I grew up in the '90s, like croaker were everywhere, and I haven't fished for them in 20 years, I think.
Yeah. So like you said, like when we were kids, like you could go and you could fill a cooler with thing. Like 12, 15-inch croaker. The last few times I've kind of gone out doing that kind of fishing, I'm not catching a lot of big croaker, right? Seeing a lot of the smaller guys, not a lot of the bigger guys. And it seems like maybe those fisheries are cyclical. Yeah. But again, like I'm not a croaker guy, so
no, it is interesting about that, because I've and we're gonna get people on the show, guys, to talk about all that stuff just specifically. But it's almost that Jurassic Park quote from the last episode we did, where like life finds a way, where it's these new species are coming in where you don't have to drive to the Carolinas to catch a redfish or a speck anymore. And you asked me that when I was a kid in the 90s, that couldn't happen. So it's just so interesting how, it's just life finds a way with that. Tidal fluctuations and stuff. I know like in the Delaware River, like you got to be super careful in some of those places because you could be beached. Is it that violent on the Eastern Shore when it comes to tide movements and stuff? If people want to take a kayak out or something?
No, a lot of places you're fine. Tidal swing, maybe 1, 2, 3 feet, stuff like that. Nothing major. If you're up in some of like the smaller creeks and guts like that, you might want to pay attention to the tide if you're in a bigger boat or something like that. There are places that, depending on the tide, depending on the weather, what direction the wind's blowing, you could end up high and dry. But largely you don't really have to worry about that. We're not getting those like super big. Sorry,
no, you're fine.
We're not getting those big swings like you see like north of us and stuff like that. So,
with your background and really setting the stage with this, how did you make that decision? Like, this is what I want to do, is I want to get into fisheries biology.
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up fishing a fair amount. My dad was a biologist for the state. He ran a oyster hatchery on Deal Island, so Somerset County.
That's cool.
Yeah. So like, as a kid that likes to fish, like during the summers, on occasion, like I'd go to work with Dad and I'd fish while he worked, I would catch croaker, catch weak fish and stuff, like right there at, mouth of the Minokan, essentially. And I'm just spending a lot of time outside. I was a kid that liked animals, liked being outside. Mom was a science teacher, elementary school science teacher. So like, and she was like one of those fun teachers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, every year she'd have Dad get a bunch of critters from work.
Oh, that's so cool.
Come in and like show kids about, sea squirts and oysters and stuff like that. A time or two, like, she was a 5th grade teacher. I like came in and showed like the older kids, like talked about like some of these things Dad would bring in, stuff like that. Like every year she would like get a chicken and like remove all the meat and stuff from it to get the carcass to like show the kids when she was doing like,
so cool.
Anatomy and bones and stuff like that. So, that's kind of the house I grew up in. And like, it makes sense that I would kind of enter some field related to science. The fisheries aspect comes from like, I saw Dad doing, working in the outdoors, essentially working with natural resources. And I liked fish more than oysters. So
how does that work? I mean, that's what I love about this is going in tie engines. I never even thought I would, but how does oyster farming work? I have no conceptual idea of like how.
Yeah. So, that facility, they'd keep oysters year round. And essentially he would get them to spawn. So they spawn, he's got larvae, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like counting larvae, kind of managing when they're spawning, that sort of thing. And those larvae, they get set on like crushed oyster shells, stuff like that.
Okay.
And then like, the state plants them in certain areas to like build reefs and that sort of thing. But yeah, he did a lot of that.
Now, and were these just to reintroduce back in the water? Or were they also to consume or?
At the time it was for putting on like existing oyster bars mostly. Yeah. I think now some of that stuff, so since he's retired, there's been like, there's wild harvest, and there's also like the oyster aquaculture industry that's kind of developed and built up. So now it's, you've got these 2 fisheries working at the same time. So like
wild versus whatever, like farm raised salmon?
Essentially.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. That's interesting. That's such a cool field to get into. I couldn't imagine having to hand count all those different larvae. Good Lord, that would be
it's
insane.
It's subsampling and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's like, it was pretty neat, and he loved it, but he's enjoying the retired life now. So.
I bet. Like, and I could totally see how that does with your mom and what your dad did. It set you up for this. And then, so what school did you decide to go to just to kind of pursue this career?
Yeah. So for undergrad, I went to just the hometown school, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. They have a decent like environmental science program. So I came up through that. I did some like undergrad research projects with, Joe Love. Yeah. So,
I've heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I did some work in the coastal bays with larval fishes, had some internships. One of them was doing like blue crab aquaculture at the Center Marine Biotechnology in Baltimore. Now I think the name's changed, but, doing blue crab aquaculture, like between like seeing what Dad did and like that experience, I'm like, aquaculture is not my thing. But I went through that program doing fisheries work, kind of going that route. And then grad school, I went to the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is like the marine science graduate college for William and Mary down in Virginia. And there I did some work with Young of the Year striped bass. I looked at detection probabilities for seine surveys. So basically, if a species occurs at a site, what are the odds we're actually going to detect them at a site with our nets? So I ran a seine survey for a couple of years, looking at some of the factors that influence how well you catch fish and whether or not you detect them at all. Also did some work on trawl surveys down there. Helped out other graduate students with, I was gill netting for longnose gar and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Also did a little kayak fishing when I was down there because, you're in Virginia, closer to the, right at the York River. And it, a good portion of my diet in grad school was like fish that I would catch,
That's so cool. Yeah. What's the coolest thing you saw out there one day, anecdotally?
You see a lot. I'll give you a couple. So, I'm running the seine survey, and during summer, somewhat coinciding with other surveys out there. One of my sites apparently was a site that Virginia, I guess DGIF at the time had an electrofishing site for catfish. So, we run a site through and ended up with some of their samples. Another time working with one of my lab mates, her project was dealing with summer flounder. They tagged them, looked at movement, that sort of thing. So we were out there tagging fish with like acoustic tags, so the ones that ping, right? And, we're out there and, it's Virginia, salty water, like, oh yeah, there's some dolphins over there. And like, you release a fish and then, 5 minutes later you see like these dolphins kind of tossing up some brown object with white on the bottom. Maybe it was one of her fish or not, but it was kind of funny. But
they're so smart, dude.
Yeah,
they are.
It's pretty interesting
how they start learning how to associate. And I think they're saying like they're starting to see this with sharks too, associating boats like this, fishermen. But the dolphins being able to figure that stuff out has always been wild to me.
Yeah.
And are those bottlenose, right? Is the right one usually?
I assume so.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I know
I'm not the marine
dolphin
mammal
biologist.
guy, so.
Yeah, that's nuts. Like, I really wish that's the coolest thing about getting out there versus, I'm assuming, backpacking the national forest versus being out there on the ocean or the bay. Just, you don't know. You really have no idea what you could pull up out of your net or anything that you could possibly see.
Yeah.
I've heard people anecdotally say like there's tarpon that'll come up into the bay. I've never seen a photo of one, but it's just all the old, salty sea dogs that say like, yeah, there's one here, one there. But it's like, I can't, like, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Like, there's nothing that would stop them in theory from migrating up there randomly.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you check the department's Facebook page, like maybe last week or the week before, there, somebody shared a video of some tarpon in the bay. So,
there's timely stuff right there.
Yeah.
That's cool. But yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's so much harder to, I think, prove people wrong with that when they say anecdotally, I might have saw something in the lower bay, because yeah, the probability is there. But that's what's so cool about, I think, what you did to work there, everything that you got to see.
Yeah.
Now, you stayed really local. Like, a lot of the biologists that I've had on the show will go to Florida, we'll go to Alabama, out to Montana. Was this by choice, or just happened that you kind of just stayed in the generic area for your research and your academic?
I guess somewhat by choice. I'm a Maryland boy. Like, this is my state. And I kind of just stayed local, like even looking at a lot of the grad schools I was considering. They were mostly Chesapeake Bay area type based. This is where I grew up. Love the bay. I really like salt marshes. So I guess it just kind of made sense to stay local.
Yeah, it's probably got that, like, that homey feel now. Like, you've just been there for so long.
Yeah, 40 years of this. So
and you got to
ride it out,
and you got to see the evolution of this place too, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. I mean, things have changed a bit since when I was a kid. But that's how things go, I guess.
I mean, we always talk about the negative stuff, but like the positive. Have you seen like a positive change from when you were a kid till now when it comes to the bay, the Eastern Shore, anything like that?
I don't know.
Because I've always thought like the water quality I think has definitely gotten better. And again, I've had like Gary Martin on and so many of those older individuals said like, yeah, like the Hudson River used to be on fire, and it's like, and things crazy like that. And it's like, well, that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, like water quality and stuff like that. I mean, like, despite what it seems like and what you see, like, yeah, water quality conditions are largely better than they were.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing, like we were talking about earlier, we're seeing more of these like kind of new fisheries now.
Yeah.
Like, a few years ago, or like when I was a kid, like maybe it happened, I don't know, but like you didn't hear about like these schools of bull reds in like lower Chesapeake Bay like you do now.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, up until like a handful of years ago, like I had never heard of it. And then it seemed like it just came on. Lower Bay now, like there's cobia,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that didn't used to really be a thing. And like not a ton, right? But they're there. Yeah. So, you kind of look at that and, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. You got the cobia, which is a big push now. I mean, you look at social media down when they really run up into underneath the bridge and everything. Like that's a big, almost tourist thing, is to go there and hunt cobia. And then the SAV, the grass beds are coming back. I know Sikorsky's doing great work there with this building reefs for the oysters. Like,
right.
I really do believe, because I know with the forward-facing sonar thing that I deal with the bass fishing side, how much social media plays into stoking things, probably more than they really are. And it's so easy to get online and say like, oh, everything's gloom and doom. But when you unplug and you actually walk outside and you look, it's like, it's not that bad, and I think that's the hardest part, is like, what is actually reality and what's actually the matrix when it comes to issues,
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, you see all this on social media and it, it could get you depressed, but like when you kind of take a step back, like, things are good. And like, there's a lot that's better than there was. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and part of that is, more people getting educated on what's going on and like engaged, right? More people care about where their food's coming from and that sort of thing. And, I think all that plays into like things getting a little better. Our generation was like the, save the bay.
Yep.
So I do think we're kind of maybe more in tune with some of that stuff too.
Oh, I think we're hella in tune to all that stuff. I mean, this generation is very subconscious about the water quality, protecting the environment, things like that, which is funny because it's like they are more in tune with protecting the environment, but they seem like more detached from the environment. It's weird. When I thought about that the other day, is so many of these people are fine with saving the bay, which is good. But then also it's like, well, have you actually gone fishing before? It's like, never have. It's like, well, have you actually gone kayaking before? Like, no. It's like, that's wild to me that our generation was out on the water and stuff. And we did a good job of restoring everything, but just how, again, we got to constantly, promote and get people out there to actually enjoy what y'all have done such a great job, protecting and nurturing. And that kind of like honestly segues into, did you know that the position, like how did you get into the position that you are now, and what does that even mean title wise?
Yeah, so I'm the Invasive Fishes Program Manager. So I'm kind of tasked with overseeing the management of invasive fishes. And in Maryland, the big three we're worried about are flathead catfish, blue catfish, northern snakehead, right? There's some other species that aren't an issue yet, that, I'm kind of keeping my eye on, and, at some point I'll probably have to deal with,
Ominous.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, we don't want like to deal with like Asian carp like the Midwest is dealing with, right?
Knock on wood there. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I was, just saw that, more people are catching freshwater drum near Conowingot now.
How did they get in there? Like a freshwater drum? That is that's crazy. I caught one at Lake Champlain 1,000 years ago. And what is their native range? I mean, it's okay if you don't know, but it's just like.
So they're sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
They're mostly like Midwest, but like their native range is like pretty doggone far. Like, so Midwest, I think they're down into like, I could be wrong. I'm sure people let me know. Like down into like Texas, Mexico.
Okay.
Like,
so Mississippi watershed westish.
yeah.
Okay.
But they've also like popped up. I'm not exactly sure where the ones in the Upper Bay are coming from. I think they kind of came through from Delaware through the canal there.
Okay.
But you know, we haven't seen a lot of them. But you know, after being first detected a handful of years ago, there's more now, and like, you're seeing like pictures of them popping up. You know, Conowingo area, like Susquehanna.
I didn't know they could handle brackish water. Honestly, that's interesting.
So you know, the Upper Bay's pretty fresh.
Okay.
So
for people listening, when we mean Upper Bay, we talking like, so in bass fishing, it's the bowl. It's up near Susquehanna Flats, Northeast River. Is that what we're talking, like that Upper Bay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And really even like, depending on time of year, you know, you can say like bring like Bush River, River into that, right?
Okay.
But yeah, you know, they can handle it, and that's one of those concerns, because there's not a lot of research going on with them outside of their native range. Don't know what kind of effect they'll really have, but they freshwater drum eat mollusks, right? So they're eating freshwater mussels, clams, that sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of restoration efforts involved in restoring freshwater mussel populations.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, in the Upper Bay, Susquehanna area, even, you know, above Conowingo Dam. So, you know, that's one of those species that I'm concerned about.
And that's interesting. And this, I'll probably have to have Mr. Sikorsky back on the show too. It's like, if we saw, if anyone has watched Shark Week ever, you know, you have the seal population boom, you know, up in the New England area, and now you have more white sharks. Is it kind of a chicken or the egg thing? Like, if we do increase, perfect world, all the freshwater mollusks back, all the oysters back, will we see an increase in some kind of predatory thing that will rise because of that? And if it wasn't invasive, would it be a normal occurring thing of a species around here? You know, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
Huh. So I never thought of that thing as being an issue down here. That is crazy.
Well,
learn something new every day.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's invasive fishes, so I'm thinking about all that. But,
yeah.
So like, you know, our big three right now.
I think, yeah, everyone does. And the flathead really is. I would say near and dear to my heart, but I live near Williamsport, near Hagerstown. So I think that was, I've had Mulligan on the show before. We talked, like, it's almost like site zero-ish for the flathead thing. Those things are crazy predators. I mean, they remind me so much like the Wells catfish in Europe, where it's such a weird predator, man. It's almost like the perfect predator. And if you guys haven't Googled what a flathead looks like, because it's not just something that eats off the bottom. It will smash a chatterbait. It'll smash a moving bait, and it's got a mouth that's just twice as big as a blue cat. Crazy creatures. Yeah. So, you know, flatheads, you know, similar native range, like Mississippi, Ohio River drainage, slightly different habitat than blue cats. So like more like rocky substrate type things. But yeah, like, you know, there's a lot of them in the non-tidal Potomac. You know, in past decade or so, like, those populations have really seemed to expanded. You know, they're also in the tidal Potomac, not as far south as, you know, like blue cats. You've got them in the entirety of the tidal Potomac everywhere. Right? So I guess to get more into like my background with the department, I started in 2010 working in southern region as a freshwater fish biologist. So that put me doing surveys on the Potomac River, Patuxent River, in addition, like, you know, lakes and ponds and stuff like that. So when I started, you know, we'd do some electrofishing. There's already a lot of blue cats there, but we wouldn't see flatheads.
You know, they were initially stocked. I think Occoquan was one of the places they were initially stocked. So occasionally we see them off of Indian Head, like one or two, right? But we really rarely saw them anywhere else. By the time I left Southern region to, you know, I did a little stint in Central region playing with trout. But by the time I left Southern region, like we were seeing more and more in the tidal Potomac, Maryland waters, so just below DC. Like, you know, we'd be doing our surveys looking at blue catfish, and, you know, all of a sudden we're seeing 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 flathead catfish, which, you know, just in the time span that I was there, so like 8, 10 years, like we weren't seeing them initially. We're seeing them now. There's also a population in the Upper Bay. So in the 2000s, it seems like they were released into Susquehanna, right? So that population has kind of come down. We're seeing them, you know, at Conowingo now. They're in the Susquehanna. They're also like, you know, pockets elsewhere, right? Like sassafras, stuff like that. But, you know, it's a species that we're seeing it expand as well.
Do they have the salinity tolerance you think blue cats have, or is it a lot different?
It's similar, but I don't think they can handle quite as much salt as blue cats can. But, you know, really we're hoping those populations aren't going to expand quite like blues have, right? And I don't think they will, just because just some of the habitats they really like.
I also wonder if it's just the nature of the species, because it just seems like, and again, this is all anecdotal on my end, they don't blow up an area like blues do. Blues really remind me of like the feral hogs. The Discovery Channel a long time did like the pig bomb epidemic, and it really just is eerily similar to the blues at how they just explode in population to the point where their biomass runs the place. And I'm not saying flatheads are still an issue, but it just seems like it's insane how they're both catfish, but how they are and how they act are a little bit different.
Yeah. So like you were talking about the flathead mouth. So flatheads eat fish. Like blue cats, like when they're small, like they're eating inverts, or eating mollusks, you know, some small fish, stuff like that. SAV, they're eating grasses, right? And then at some point they start to transition to incorporate more fish protein in their diets. So adults are eating a lot of fish, right? Flatheads kind of start out eating a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, they're hitting chatterbaits, stuff like that. Like, yeah, they're
very predatorial,
right? And
very
like
predatorial.
you know, you catch blue cats as like bycatch on like chatterbait, spinnerbait, stuff like that. But flatheads are definitely eating fish in a way that like blues aren't quite.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and then, you know, you were talking about like biomass and like numbers of blue cats. You know, that
it's stupid.
Yeah, and like, you know, that's the big concern. Like, you know, you've got this non-native fish that, you know, they were stocked because, you know, they taste good, they're fun to catch because they get big, and they do well in big river systems, right? Like, makes a lot of sense. But, you know, they get big because they're eating a lot of different prey items. You know, like we found, you know, we did some diet work on the Patuxent. You know, we're seeing around 40 different prey items in their guts.
Diet work.
Oh,
diet work. Sorry.
Yeah, so,
okay,
you know,
gotcha.
we looked at, I don't know, a couple thousand stomachs of fish. And we're finding like things like SAV, which is kind of expected, but
that's interesting to me though, because I have never heard someone say that before, that they would forage on SAV. I thought that'd only be like a grass carp or some type of carp species. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so like you find it in their guts. Part of that could be that they're looking for like inverts, like worms and stuff.
So vacuuming and just taking, okay.
Yeah, but you know, it's certainly something they're eating, and you know, they're getting some sort of dietary bonus from it, right? But you know, they're eating American eel, which, you know, there is some concern about declines in American eel populations. They're eating white perch, gizzard shad, Atlantic menhaden. There's evidence that they're probably consuming striped bass eggs. Blue crabs, there's been some work done in Virginia to kind of estimate how much blue crabs, blue catfish are eating. I believe the figure is like 400 metric tons in a portion of the James River. That's a lot of blue crabs, right? Like, there's a lot to be concerned about this fish that eats a ton of stuff and they get really big, right? I've seen blue cats over 80 pounds, personally. A few years back, early 2010s, we did a tagging study looking at movement and essentially movement, right? In some population work. So part of that, we were shocking fish to get samples that we'd tag, in the Potomac off of Fort Washington. That's a place that people catch big blue cats. One day we caught, I think, 3 over 80 pounds that we tagged and released. A fish that gets that big, that's here year round, that there's a lot to be concerned there. They also spread pretty quickly in Maryland. So blue cats, they were stocked into the Virginia rivers in the 70s and 80s. The first one popped up in the Potomac in 1987 or something like that. By the late 1990s, there was a lot of them. 2000s, they really, really took off. Now, the major portion of the commercial fishery happens on the Potomac. But, mid 2000s, they popped up in the Nanticoke, the Patuxent. And, we, in the past 10, 15 years, they've expanded throughout Maryland waters. So they're in essentially every major tributary of the bay now. And they're just common in the upper bay, right? And where they occur, in a lot of places they occur, the density is really, really high. There are a lot of blue cats out there. There's a lot that we're concerned about with those numbers of those fish, particularly.
With the blue cat, I've always found this fascinating where the James, the Virginia's dealing with the issue too, honestly, all of Chesapeake Bay. But you look at the Mississippi Delta, New Orleans, is it the same issue there? Do you know? And maybe you talk to what you can, but it's anecdotally, do they have the issue? If not, what's the difference?
Yeah, so that's a question I get a lot, and I should probably have a better answer. When a species evolves in an area, the whole sorry.
Oh, you're fine. And if you want, you can move it up a little higher. That's perfectly fine.
The whole ecosystem is it's part of the ecosystem. Everything, all the species that's around, they kind of co-evolved, right? In novel environments, certain species, the ones that become invasive, do really well. And usually they're generalists. Usually they're pretty doggone fecund, get to be large size. So, there's not a lot eaten an adult blue catfish, right? I've recently read a paper that kind of looked at where food is allocated, within the animal, resource wise. It seems like a lot of the food that blue catfish eat goes towards maturation. So getting big and essentially reaching puberty early, right? Getting early maturity. And there's obviously some for somatic growth. So just physically getting bigger, but there's a lot of their resources putting towards reproduction. And they can kind of go a long time without feeding, right? More so than some of our native species. So in degraded conditions, in situations where resources are limited, they're going to do better than a lot of the like species that we have here that are native or even non-native, but non-invasive. So like things like that make them really, really successful, and is kind of part of why we're dealing with the problem we're dealing with now.
There's a really random, and this is just something that I thought would be cool to bring up. In Australia, they have the king toad issue, and they hypothesize and are thinking about doing genetic testing on some of them to make that so when they breed, they become sterile and release them back out into the wild. Early phases of it may work, may not, but it's interesting that we're bringing back woolly mammoths. We could potentially do that. Like, is that something like could be done versus just trying to catch 10,000 tons of them, which is good, do what you can. But Is there other things down the road with technology that could potentially come down the pike to make your job easier?
Maybe. You look like out in the West, like some of the trout waters, there's invasive species out there. So, brook trout, right? Like they're native here.
It's crazy to think
and
that.
We're doing like a ton of work trying to like protect those populations, like coastwide. Out there they're considered invasive. They're damaging these other trout resources. Like people are experimenting with releasing YY males.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so essentially, let's alter the structure of the population such that it's male heavy over a handful of generations, and their progeny aren't going to reproduce, or they don't even produce them, right? But just overload it with these fish that like gradually kind of change that population structure so that you have a lot of males and not a lot of females. That work's happening now out west. Like my gut tells me like that particular aspect of it wouldn't work here. We're dealing with a lot of fish in a really, really big area, not some like, really small stream. But it would be nice if some technology was developed that could help in the management of these species, could help like just reduce abundance. At this point, we're not going to extirpate blues, flatheads, northern snakehead. That's not where we're at now. But where we are is, let's reduce spread, like prevent spread to new systems, and where they do occur, particularly like say sensitive areas or something like that, if we can reduce biomass to kind of mitigate those negative effects, that's really what we're going for. Like you said, if like as many as we can remove just to reduce biomass, like that's where we are right now, which is part of why a lot of our efforts are going towards promoting fisheries for these species, both commercial and recreationally, right? A lot of our efforts are geared towards just biomass removal, just to kind of limit the potential for negative effects. There's that figure out there that, in a portion of the James, like 75% of the fish biomass is blue catfish. If we can avoid that, let's avoid that. There's a lot of fisheries resources that Maryland has to offer that, we talked about. Like if we can protect those by mitigating damage, by reducing biomass of these invasives, that's what we're going to do.
No, and that's the thing. We just hope other things come down the pike. And I know people probably watching this are like, they're changing XY chromosomes. What you don't know, because I do these rabbit holes, the U.S. government spends, I think it's a couple $1 million, way more than that, down in Panama, because there's a beetle that will destroy livestock. And they eradicated it because they have places in Panama where they raise the female version of this beetle and irradiate it so it's sterile, because once the males mate, they die. And then they carpet bomb it to kill it off. And that's been happening apparently for like 20, 30 years. And that seems like science fiction. And it's just fascinating with live scope, with what we're doing with genetics and AI, like what people's jobs. I had the guy on that runs Lake Fork and Toledo Bend. He talks about like live scope. Like we get to the point where you can just watch fish eventually and learn their behaviors even more. And like, that's like crazy to think that we could get there with all these different technologies in 10, 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so like speaking about technology, just earlier this month, we worked with a group out of VCU. Handful of years ago, they were using drones
cool.
in conjunction with like electrofishing to get a better count of fish.
That's neat.
So to provide some like context and background, so like low frequency electrofishing, so applying electrical current to the water to like stun fish so you can collect them and count them, is kind of one of the standard methods that freshwater fish biologists use to survey fish populations. Ictalurids, so like catfishes, respond really, really well to low frequency electrofishing. So like these like super long wavelengths, low amps, electrofishing. So like, so a way people survey catfish populations is they, electrofish with these low frequency wavelengths. And, the fish respond so that, within 30, 40, 50 yards of the boat, you've got fish surfacing. They don't necessarily respond like some of the other species that we have for like standard electrofishing. So they're not like necessarily knocked out that we can easily go through and collect them. But so what happens is you apply current to the water, and in say a 30, 40 yard radius around the boat, you've got fish just making the water boil essentially in like really, really high dense areas. And you're going around netting as many as you can. And sometimes you employ like a chase boat. So you've got the electrofisher shock in the water, they're collecting what fish they can. And you've got like another boat zipping around, getting as many fish as they can. One of the issues with that is the fish don't stay up that long. So what you can net and bring on board your boat may or may not really be a good representation of what actually came up and what was there. We've played around with it in the past, like Virginia, their survey, they've had surveys in place for years, electrofishing survey for catfishes. My program is new, like started last November, right? We don't have those surveys in place, but we have shocked catfish, and at some point you reach gear saturation. The fish aren't up for that long, and we've always kind of questioned if what we catch accurately represents what's actually there, right? So all that's to kind of give you a little background. So like these fish come up and you see their white bellies on the, Chesapeake Bay rivers, so like brownish, greenish water. You see these white bellies. So the idea is to have a drone overhead that can count the fish that surface that we can't get, right? And to kind of compare what we can net versus what the drone can see. So really cool. We're looking into whether or not that technology is going to be useful, and if we can apply that to some of our surveys to get more accurate counts.
How do you integrate that? Because as a layman, it just seems like record and then back home count and then compare. Is that simplistic, or is it more?
That's where it started, but like I said, VCU's been doing this for a handful of years.
Okay.
Now there is some like AI technology that can identify targets, identify fish and count them.
That's cool.
And if that gets us better to what's actually there for monitoring purposes, like that's great. And that may be where like surveys are headed, to like incorporate some of those technologies. So like that's like one of those really exciting things that like I can't wait to see how those data look.
And this is not sci-fi. I mean, you think like some of this stuff seems like it's Star Trek, but it's not. We're here. I mean, I know that they're talking about with Garmin like eventually integrating AI with it, so it'll it'll make the echo returns different colors based on the species, because the AI will be able to figure that out. And this is 2024. Like, this is just mind blowing that we can do this stuff, and what it'll do for your research and just being able to get information quickly and get a better scope. Because like, it's not just a pond. You're talking about the bay, basically the estuary. Like, that's such a massive area for any group to try to handle. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, in terms of my catfish monitoring, we have a lot of rivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they're in all of them, and they're just in the whole Upper Bay complex. So, this monitoring program is going to be pretty interesting, just to like get the coverage that we need to figure out what these populations are doing, figure out how our removals are actually, hopefully, limiting these populations in some degree, right? Whether that's changing size structure to like maybe push it towards smaller fish to kind of get those big spawners out, or just to see like, in year X, commercial harvesters removed, 500,000 pounds of catfish, blue cats. So after that, how does the population respond? How does it look? Are we actually limiting population growth? Is that something that we kind of double down on? Is that something we double down on? Or if maybe we should be looking at some other way to try to limit these populations? So that's kind of where we are.
What is, it sounds like, because we haven't even touched on the snakehead, and this is a good segue for that, is the blue cat the harder one to kind of deal with when it comes to just tracking, getting the data? Are snakeheads a little bit like, I've had Odenkirk of Virginia on the show a couple of times, and some of the things he talked about is like, because they can go everywhere, he has a lot harder to electroshock them, because it's like, is it a high tide? Is it a low tide? Like, there's so many variables with that. Like, how hard is it for you to gauge the snakehead population compared to the blues?
So luckily, for snakehead, we've got like a kind of region-wide group working on it. Fish and Wildlife is involved. So yeah, there's like snakehead surveys in place that they started. We monitor them with the Tidal black bass survey. So every fall, and monitoring those black bass populations in tidal rivers. If a snakehead is detected, it's removed. And so that's allowed us to, over the past 10, 15 years, to kind of monitor how those populations are in terms of numbers and in distribution. So where they occur in rivers, like when they pop up in new systems. Snakehead are tough because, the habitats they're living in, super shallow waters, hard to get to. There's times when, we're out surveying and like, there's like that essentially gut over there that, probably has a lot of snakehead in it. Like, we can't go back there. Or if you shock, and like, they don't shock really nicely, so they can swim away, and you don't have a long time to net them. But yeah, like, if a snakehead is shocked and like heads up into some really shallow water, like, we can't get them. Stuff like that makes them pretty difficult. They also do pretty well in brackish water. Electrofishing doesn't work that well in salty water. So, we're limited in how we can get those fish, how we can monitor these populations.
And this is anecdotal, but how intelligent are they compared to the blue cat? Because anecdotally, it sounds like they're very aware of us trying to get rid of them, it seems like. Or maybe that's just the psychology we put on them.
I don't like to like get into like whether fish are smart or not. I do think, and again, like anecdotally, like fish can be
wary, I guess.
Yeah, they can be pretty wary.
Because like a trout is more wary than a bluegill, generally speaking. I think it seems like
possibly, right?
Yeah.
But if you're fishing for a snakehead and you throw the same frog, or if it's getting hammered with lures over the top of his head all the time, maybe it's going to be less apt to take a whatever, right? they, there's been some work out looking at how largemouth bass respond to like boat motors and boat traffic.
Yeah.
And like, that sort of stuff does affect them. I wouldn't be surprised if it does the same for snakehead. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how smart they actually are.
It's fascinating because like when it comes to the kayak, the kayak culture around catching snakeheads, they're like, well, when they're first introduced, you could do this, and this is where they are, classic places. And now again, because of technology, more people have forward-facing sonar, and people are saying like, I caught this one in 15 feet of water. I thought it was a bass. What's going on? I thought they could only be in 6 inches. And it's almost like they're evolving to like, because of all the pressure, they're changing their pattern behavior more so than blue cats, or maybe it's just that more people are talking about it than with the blue cats potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I would think that I don't think that like they're necessarily adapting or anything.
Okay.
It could be that there's more people fishing for them now than there was, right? So
that's
like
100%.
Yeah. So like you're getting all this anecdotal evidence, like it could be that and probably was that it's sometimes they just are in deeper water, right? Yeah, I mean, I would say that like we're seeing that, not necessarily that they're kind of going through these super changes in their habitat or behavioral patterns because of people. But again, like they're an aggressive fish, but they are pretty weary, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think it's just in their nature.
Yeah. And again, it adds to their almost mysticism, because you can't buy the marketing they got initially if you were talking about making a brand, because when the mainstream media kicked in on it way back when, that's going to eat your dog, your kid, everything. The big ones are called dragons by people that like to catch them. It's just the marketing around that was just a person's dream, and then it's elusive, and that's what's so weird, is it builds that mysticism. And I think that's why the cult, I like to call that, has gotten so big around it. And I haven't seen this, I think in a long, musky anglers, it kind of reminds me of like musky anglers too. Like it's that cool goth kid in high school that like does their own thing.
Yeah.
But it's our area thing. Like you can't do this many places in the world, and this is it. And it's drawing people. It's just fascinating to see this cultural thing develop here.
Yeah. And like part of that's really good, right?
Mm-hmm. Because
like we've got more people aware that this species is out there. And we want them removed, right? So like, a big part of what the department's doing is promoting these fisheries. Like, go out and catch snakehead. Fun to catch. They start checking off all those boxes of species that, are fun to catch. Like they're big, they'll take a bait, you can catch them on bass tackle, and people know how to catch bass, right?
Yeah.
Like probably the most popular fish in the country.
Easy transition. Yep.
Maryland, like got the Potomac, got the Upper Bay, every farm pond. Like people know how to catch bass, similar tackle, right? So like it's good that we have people going out there targeting these fish, going out there catching these fish. We also want people to go fishing, right? Like we're a resource agency. Use the resource. And like snakehead tastes good. Like, there's a lot of catch and release angling going on, which is fine. We certainly don't encourage it, but it's fine if you catch a snakehead, you don't want to kill it. You have to take your picture and release it right away. You're not allowed to move it to a different water body. You can't have another live one in your possession. But there's also like a major harvest fishery for them.
Oh yeah.
And they taste good. So by all means, go out, catch your snakehead, kill them and eat them. They taste really good. And part of that is playing into like reduced biomass, right? Just to limit the potential negative ecological effects, pull these fish out of the water. So
it's so, I personally, when you sit back, I just think this is fascinating. Odenkirk talked about that when he went to Japan and stuff, and like over there they're like, wait, you want to get rid of it? And then bass are like, it's like completely like Freaky Friday. We're over there, like you can't. And this is fun, guys. If you look on Instagram, you will never see a Japanese angler putting a bass back because you go to prison. That's why they always cut away and stuff. And that's just, it blew my mind. Like it's such a Freaky Friday thing. Where over there, it's like they're killing all the largemouth on site, but the snakehead. It's what you said about the brook trout too. But it's the culture that over there, the bass fishing becomes underground, and the more you promote getting rid of them, it's always that side effect where people like to catch them. And it's just interesting to see in 10, 15 years where it goes here, because they are really good to eat, by the way. They are fantastic eating fish.
Yeah.
Is there one species you think that's easier to put a lid down more than others? Or you think all equally just as hard to deal with?
It's probably all kind of equally difficult. Each one has like complications and issues. Blue cats it's a lot of them. They, like they really, really readily disperse. It's a lot of.
It is, and I don't think that can be understated. Like how, again, if you go Google up the Discovery Channel pig bomb, I really think that's a great thing to give you a visual, like how many can get in there and they root and they just destroy everything. It's insane.
Yeah, and for blue cats, like in my office, I was sent a picture that I printed out from a commercial guy that had, on the Potomac, like 100 metric tons of blue cats in one of his nets. That's like the amount of biomass. It should concern everyone.
It should, but it's like when the numbers get, I think Winston Churchill said like one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. Like the stat gets so big, it's cartoonish. When you say a metric ton, how many people like right now listening to this thing on Apple, Spotify, and I heard like, do you know what a metric? I can't always visualize how big a metric ton is. It's cartoonish, the numbers people talk about, but it's the reality. That's how people don't even think that much could exist in the Potomac, let alone just one species. It's insane.
Right. Yeah. And it's, like you said, it's one species. There's a lot to be concerned about there. We have all these different fisheries in the state, ecologically important, economically important. And over the past 10, 20 years, we've got this new species that is really, I hate to say it's exploded, but it's exploded, distribution, abundance, there's a lot of them now. This spring we were coming back from the shore from visiting family, and I was, driving across the Bay Bridge, and there was a guy pulling up a 30-pound blue cat off the riprap right there.
Wow.
5 years ago, people weren't catching them at Sandy Point in the spring, right? You're seeing now they're going in people's crab pots.
Really?
Yeah, the smaller ones.
Okay, yeah.
They're going in crab pots. You hear reports of people participating in these traditional fisheries. So spring run of white perch, yellow perch. Sometimes you want to catch a white perch or yellow perch, which is people have done it for generations, right? During the spring, you catch that spawn and run. And now instead of their, white perch, they're catching 10, 20-pound blue cats. And that's fine if you want to catch a blue cat. You don't always want to catch a blue cat. They're getting in commercial watermen's nets and, causing havoc, right? So we've got these other fisheries, and you've got this new guy on the block that's interfering and affecting all of that, right? Snakeheads, in tidal waters, maybe snakeheads are not causing a ton of ecological damage. We don't know, because it's still they've really only really taken off in the past 20 years on the Potomac, 10, 15 years elsewhere, if that, right?
That's a good thing just to put a pin in there, because so the catfish were introduced in the 80s, and then the snakehead was introduced, like you said, 20 years ago. So if you guys are keeping score at home, just think about that time scale, because I'm not going to math too good this morning, but it's 30 to 40 years for the blue cats, right? For time rise compared to this, it's a fraction of the time the snakeheads have been here. Yeah,
and blue cats, like I said, in Maryland, it's been the past 10 or 15 years that they've really taken off.
Mm-hmm.
I remember early on in my career with the department, so early 2010s, we went to the upper bay trying to find blue cats, and they were certainly there, but like we couldn't find them electrofishing. Now, like
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, like snakehead, like they haven't been here that long, and ecologically speaking, 20 years is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But like as well as I do that like it's largely a harvest fishery. Like there's a lot of catch and release, but snakehead fishing, there's a lot of harvest going on. You look at Blackwater, places like that. There's a lot of fish being harvested. With that level of harvest that we're seeing, like they're still expanding range. They're still crazy abundant in certain areas. There's a lot to be concerned about in like a resource limited situation, which we haven't really necessarily seen in like Potomac or someplace like that. But if something happened, if food resources were limited, I don't know if snakehead outcompete largemouth bass. Maybe, maybe not. And it's not just largemouth, but
anything.
Anglers.
Yeah.
We talk about the sport fish. We talk about the game fish. There was some earlier work with snakehead looking at diet overlap with longnose gar, like native fish been here for millions of years. Like, I don't know what they're going to do to those populations.
How many years is the perfect for you to say a sample size? So, and I think I misspoke earlier. I think the James rivers when they were introduced was like the late 80s, 90s, but so
70s.
70s,
so it's
70s.
like mostly 70s
Okay.
into the 80s.
So that would be, that's a good chunk of time. Is that enough, let's say from 70s till now, or would you want 50 years, 100 years? What would the safe, conservative, small range be to be like, this is good enough data that we can probably say like, this is what's happening?
That is a really good question, and I don't know. Because at the same time that, we're seeing these increases in abundance over these kind of 10, 20-year time spans, there's also these other kind of environmental, other factors affecting
Never one
fish
thing.
populations.
Yeah.
Like, you really, I wish there was like I could point to say like, oh, that's the effect of snakehead. But, you have all these other things working and affecting fisheries resources that, we may or may not be monitoring. That's the other thing.
That's true.
That's
true.
A lot of our surveys are directed towards like sport fish and game fish. Less resources are devoted to mummy chog or banded killifish or even like sunfishes, right? Which could very well be affected by these invasives, right?
100%.
It kind of just depends on like if you're monitoring the thing that matters.
That makes sense though, because if you think of it like a lake with ice, if you just keep adding weight to it, eventually it cracks, and it's usually never subtle. It just all of a sudden it doesn't support it. And there is something I think that happens in these ecosystems where it's slowly, and then it busts through. I mean, there's that stupid bug, I forget the name of it, that flies around that we see now when I run on the trail.
Spotted lanternfly.
Never saw it before, but all of a sudden you see it. Like, so there's that break period where all of a sudden it breaks through in the environment. And yeah, that makes so much sense. But you're right. You don't have resources to monitor everything. That's the problem.
And like, I wish we could.
Yeah.
Part of my background. So like I went to school at VIMS. They have a long-term monitoring program. Like that juvenile trawl survey has been around for like 50 years or something. Like that's great because you've got like this long survey that you can kind of look back and see the effects of some things, right? Similar, there's a striped bass seine survey, years and years of that. There aren't necessarily a lot of those long-term monitoring programs in place, but a lot of like whether or not you can detect something going on kind of depends on like if you have data before the introduction of snakehead, before the introduction of blue cats, that sort of thing, and we don't always have that. So,
dude, I really appreciate this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I've learned a ton of things. I mean, one thing before we wrap up here is if people wanted to, first off, on the fun side, if people wanted to stay on the Eastern Shore to go vacation there, do you have any suggestions of where people could go stay or visit?
Well, I haven't lived there in, I don't know, 20 years. But there's a lot of places on the shore that, kind of cater to tourism, right? Depending on what you're looking at, like I'll say if you can find something on the lower shore, not necessarily Ocean City, but sure, Ocean City, St. Michael's, stuff like that. For your audience, people looking to fish, like if you can find something in Cambridge or something like that. Like
Cambridge, okay.
Like go catch some snakehead in Blackwater, run up the Nanticoke, catch some blue cats. Please harvest them. Like that's what we're going for. You don't have to, but we strongly encourage it because honestly, like blue cats taste really good. Snakehead tastes really good. Why not eat them? It's always nice to know where your protein's coming from, and you can point to it and say that's where it's coming from. You may be saving a blue crab in the process, so like by all means, go ahead and eat them. But at this point, just anything to keep your money local, keep your money in the state, support that industry. I think that's good.
And if there's anything information-wise, if people have questions or anything, is there anything I could link in the episode description that can help people get more information?
Yeah, if you want to get more info, you can shoot me an email. The department has our Invasive Fishes webpage has information on like where you can go, like some biology and research going on with these fish. The department has a fishing access page that'll let you know, like, a map that shows, hey, I can go to this spot, I can launch a boat here, or I can't launch a boat here. This is an area I can fish, right? That's a really, really good resource. But really, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll try to get back to you.
So this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. As always, guys, link in the episode description to everything that we talked about. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, fishingthedmv@gmail.com. If you have a question, again, please ask. It's how we actually get things moving, is with actual conversation, not just yelling in the echo chamber that it is Instagram and all those wonderful places. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.